We have been listening to President Trump in the Oval Office there for about the last 45 minutes or so, and some news today on the tariff front. The president there in the Oval announcing that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, he says potentially, if there aren't trade agreements, then new tariff rates will be set.
We've been ripped off by every country in the world practically, and friend and foe. They all want to make deals, and we're going to make deals, but they're going to be fair deals. They're not going to be rip-off deals.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Another big move in the markets today. I'll explain why there's other movements as well on the high seas and what it might mean for those packages you've ordered. The former White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, joins me here on The Hill in moments to react to what we just heard from the president on tariffs, auto tariffs. Our now Kelly Meyer questioning the president in the Oval Office. Also this evening, tensions flaring at Yale University. Pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli protesters briefly setting up a new encampment. How the university responds as the Trump administration continues to take on the Ivies. And we take you to the northern border for a NewsNation exclusive.
I mean, they're going to take advantage of the path of least resistance. So if we give them a path of least resistance, they'll use it.
What we are learning tonight about law enforcement's latest battle in the war on fentanyl. But first, we begin with our Joe Khalil live here with us tonight on The Hill. Joe, you and I have been sitting here following this. I thought there were sort of two big pieces of news there from the president. One, he said that if there are not trade deals in the next 2 to 3 weeks, then he'll set the tariff rates. I wasn't totally sure if he was talking about all the countries or specifically China. And also the president there on auto tariffs said maybe they could go up potentially.
Yeah. And to our closest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, he talked about they're potentially going up. I think the through line today, because we heard from Secretary Bessent this morning, this is the second time we've heard from President Trump, was there is a roadmap for these tariffs to come down, specifically as it relates to China. Talked about. These are very high tariffs, 145% on everything that's coming in right now. But he said there do need to be conditions, meaning China needs to come to the table in a more earnest way. And if that does not happen, President Trump effectively said, we will keep a high tariff in place and we will, in his words, set the price or set the tariff. And that'll be what it is. Take a listen to what he said next about, again, timeline and how this might actually play out.
We're going to set the tariff. We just set the tariff. It's something that we think that will happen, I'd say, over the next couple of weeks. Wouldn't you say? I think so. Over the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be setting the number. And we're going to pick, could be for China, too. Could be for China.
Now, Blake, obviously, all of
Could
this
be for China.
Could be for China.
Right.
So he's
hence
talking
a little bit of the
everybody.
Yeah, hence, I guess the questions there about how all of this is going to play out.
And I will just say, it seems like this timing is not a coincidence. You had very big industry leaders meeting with the White House today, painting a pretty dark picture on what the economy could look like if the tariffs do not come down. So sort of a roadmap, a little bit more hopeful today in tone from the White House, as you just heard.
Joe Khalil, live with us tonight here on The Hill. Joe, thank you. All right, so businesses, of course, rely on China for manufacturing and sourcing their products. U.S. imports from China last year hit nearly $440 billion. And according to the logistics platform Flexport, 95% of those goods are transported by sea in shipping containers. Ryan Peterson is the CEO of Flexport. He has one of the best views to see what the tariffs actually mean for products being shipped to your doorstep every day. Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport, friend of the show, back with us once again here on The Hill. Perfect moment to talk to you, Ryan.
I'm glad I got here a little early to hear what the president had to say. So,
what'd you make of it?
Breaking news right here.
Yeah, so what'd you make of it? Because I know one of your big things, and again, you've got this view all over the world for businesses, small, medium, and large, and sort of how they're moving products and how they're trying to adapt to all this, specifically with China, right? And you told me a couple weeks ago, let's be calm, let's not, sort of panic here. But you said in a thread today, you said, quote, soon we may find ourselves in a bullwhip scenario where Trump relaxes the tariffs, all those canceled orders get rebooked, creating a huge surge. And with all the canceled services and repositioned vessels, there won't be enough throughput in the ocean network to keep up. Explain what you mean there, and especially coming off of what we just heard.
I mean, it's, he's very nonchalant, saying he may relax the tariffs in 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, there's millions of jobs hanging in the balance. Like, is he going to do it? And when is he going to do it? The first ships carrying cargo paying these new tariffs started to arrive on Monday, just a couple of days ago. So people are paying these new duties effective this week. And all those people are going, well, people are starting to scramble to move goods into bonded warehouses where they won't have to pay the duties until they exit the warehouse. There's all kinds of strategizing happening, and people are feeling paralysis right now. If you know the duties are going to come down, the right move is to wait and hold off on shipping new cargo. We've seen a 65%, 60 to 65% drop in ocean freight from China to the U.S. It means if nothing gives, if nothing changes, he doesn't go forward with that, you're going to have massive shortages across the economy as these goods just stop showing up and stop being available on the shelves.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that point up, because there was this reporting that the president met with the heads of Walmart, of Target, of Home Depot, and they warned the president of just that, of empty shelves. And I just heard you say there could be empty shelves, and I don't want to single those companies out. But again, you deal with countries all over the world and all across this country. And so if the tariffs aren't relaxed with China, is that a reality in your view, Ryan?
For sure, that's what's going to happen if they don't get relaxed. And so we're in this very strange scenario where you're like, okay, either there's nothing available or he relaxes it and all of these goods that got canceled, all those orders that were canceled, they'll start to flow in. And in the meantime, ocean carriers, the people that operate the ships, have already started to reposition cargo ships. Instead of serving China, they're going down to Vietnam. They're picking up new trade routes going from Southeast Asia to Europe or to the U.S., but they're moving away from China. And so if all of a sudden these ships come back online, that's what I'm getting at when I say, hey, there could be this bullwhip effect of cargo's returning to the market, but there's no ships there to pick them up. And you'll see bottlenecks similar to what we saw during COVID with
so does that raise prices?
Thousands of containers waiting to move.
Does that raise prices then, Brian, if that's indeed what happens?
Yeah, for sure the price of ocean freight will surge if that happens. Okay. So it's either like price of ocean freight's going to hit rock bottom, but customers are going to have to pay these giant tariffs, or don't have to pay the tariffs, but the ocean freight price goes sky high. It's kind of you lose either way for importers.
Let me try to simplify this here for a second. It's a complex story with a lot of moving pieces. I had Kevin O'Leary on the show the other day, and I asked him, Ryan, what are you telling your companies, Kevin? Kevin, you got companies of all size. And here's what he said to me, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
China's getting expensive. People don't realize that. It's not a cheap place to operate. Plus, you got all this noise. So we went to Vietnam there, and Vietnam's already offered a zero tariff deal to Trump.
So you mentioned Vietnam. Kevin told me as well, his companies basically have gone to Vietnam and Cambodia. When companies are calling you and they're saying, Ryan, what do we do here? Same question for you. What are you telling them?
Well, I wouldn't do anything right now. You're either too late or too early to go down to Vietnam. You should have done it before any of this started, or you should wait a couple months and figure out what the trade deal is that Trump puts in place and happens on both Vietnam and China. So I think people right now are kind of, sure, go explore it, go have those meetings, but you're in a bit of a wait and see moment before you take action. The other thing I would say is, I don't know his portfolio exactly. He's got a lot of Shark Tank companies and smaller companies, but they're going to have a hard time get in line. These manufacturers in Vietnam have a long waiting list of big mega corporations, Fortune 500s, who are setting up big factories. And you show up and you're like, hey, I need you to make 500 units of this product. They don't have time for that. They're busy. They're booked. So it's going to be tough for small business.
Ryan Peterson is the CEO of Flexport. Again, he knows what's going on all over the world with this stuff. You know, I appreciate you, Ryan, especially being here right after the president with that news of maybe 2 to 3 weeks. We'll see what happens here. Ryan Peterson, talk to you again soon.
See. Appreciate you having me on.
You got it. All right, still to come tonight. Here from the Hill. You know him as well, Mick Mulvaney, other side of the break. Mick's going to join me. Not only was there the big tariff news, Mick, did you hear what the president said there about millionaires? Mick's mic isn't on. Get it on during the commercial break. But Mick said, there we go. He said I did. I'm telling you, that is some big news. I'm going to ask Mick about it on the other side of the break, and an exclusive report along the northern border as officials tackle the flow of fentanyl. What Allie Bradley is seeing tonight, plus this. Happening once again, this time at Yale, where pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel activists setting up tents on campus. What might the Trump administration do about that? Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the center of politics. Thank you for being with us and sticking with us tonight, as there was a lot of news there just out of the Oval Office. We'll break it down other side of the break. NewsNation, I'm Blake Berman. One of the big questions throughout the day has been, what would the president say today on China? Last night, he softened his tone a bit on tariffs. Today, he wouldn't specifically say, nor would the White House, when tariffs could potentially be lowered or what that number might be. Our Kelly Meyer live for us on the North Lawn. Kelly, great job inside the Oval Office. Kelly was just putting those questions to the president on China. You asked him, Kelly, sort of what his response would be given China's rhetoric today. I wonder what your sense is tonight of where things stand between the U.S. and China and tariffs.
Yeah, it's really the tale of two different countries, Blake. You know, we're seeing the rhetoric coming out of the White House today is that everything is going great. We have a great relationship with President Xi Jinping. A deal will be coming. It will be happening. That was his response when I asked him about what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said today, and that's the U.S. is threatening and blackmailing us into a deal. They see it as they aren't going to stop here. They are going to continue fighting. And he says that there is direct dialogue between the two, but we don't really know that or have evidence of that yet. And even the Treasury Secretary saying that there weren't talks happening. So we were trying to get a sense of whether or not he was going to keep that 145% on. He didn't say a lower number. You mentioned there about setting the tariff rate. That could be on not only China, but other countries. We don't know what that looks like. Is it the number that he talked about on Liberation Day? Is it the number that he's going to set a new number after this 90-day pause? There's just a lot of questions there. And he seemed as though he didn't want to give a direct answer, to give him some wiggle room if the discussions, the negotiations change and keep things fluid. But he just continued to say the relationship they have with China is great and that they are going to make a deal. And if they don't, he says the U.S. will make a deal for them. Blake.
Our Kelly Meyer inside the Oval asking the president questions with us tonight here on the Hill. Kelly, thank you. With me now, Mick Mulvaney, the president's former chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello, sir.
Hello, Berman.
Am I right to have picked up on that 2 to 3 week comment from the president, basically suggesting that if there's not deals in 2 to 3 weeks, then tariff rates are going to be set? And I'm just doing some math here. That doesn't equate to a 90-day pause. So, Mick, tell me why you think Donald Trump said that and what he is trying to do there.
Yeah, listen, I was just listening to an interview with Kelly, and I got to give her credit. She's down there now enough to where I think she's getting a feel for the place, and the word she used is wiggle room, and I think that's what you saw today. Look, there's comments about, we'll probably have a deal in 2 to 3 weeks. There's a lot of wiggle room in that statement. What do I look at, Berman, more than the details or the lack of details? It was the language, the energy. It was a subdued sort of response to a lot of the questions about trade, about elections overseas, about tourism here in the U.S. It sounds almost like there's a lot less Peter Navarro in the room, the senior trade advisor, and a lot more Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. The president's demeanor is different. And Kelly picked up on that quite nicely. I think they're trying to sort of calm the markets and say, look, we're going to work through this. We're not going to be held to any hard deadlines, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 90 days. But we're doing our best, and we're not going to blow up the system.
All right, as the president was talking, I sent the team a note. I said, cut that soundbite, get it ready for Mulvaney. Totally different story. Roll it, though.
I think it would be very disruptive because a lot of the millionaires would leave the country. In the old days, they left states. They go from one state to the other. Now with transportation so quick and so easy, they leave countries. You'll lose a lot of money if you do that.
The question there, Mick, was do you support a millionaire tax increase? There has been this discussion in Washington about Republicans raising taxes, which you would normally slap someone across the face and say, what are you talking about? Republicans don't raise taxes. The president there seemed to suggest that he doesn't want to raise taxes on millionaires. You don't necessarily buy it. Why?
Yeah, I mean, that's Republican orthodoxy. It's what you would expect a Republican president to say. But again, look at the demeanor. He wasn't aggressive with it. He's sort of more subdued in dealing with the issue. What do I think this means? I think it means, look, at the end of the day, if the only thing standing between Donald Trump and getting the tax package that he wants, do I think that higher bracket is on the table? I think it probably is. That's the difference, again, between being a populist Republican and a conservative Republican. But again, what you heard today was Republican orthodoxy. It's what you would expect him to say. That doesn't tell me, however, that this is off the table. I don't think that it is.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us. A lot of news out of the Oval. Mick, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. We'll see you.
You got it. All right. Still much more ahead tonight. Here on the Hill. Demonstrations at Yale University.
We are the people.
A prominent Israeli leader on campus, and that was the scene. So how will the Trump White House respond? Other side of the break, a top Republican who graduated from Yale, a member of the House Education Committee as well, that is looking into that university, joins us live. Just about 6:30 here on the East Coast and in Washington. Welcome back to the Hill. Tonight, the Trump administration's crackdown on Venezuela's Tren de Aragua gang continues. The Department of Justice now charging 27 alleged members in New York. The president's border czar, Tom Homan, and the New York City mayor, Eric Adams, making that announcement. The charges include racketeering, narcotics, sex trafficking, and robbery. Homan with this message outside the White House.
We send a strong message. Tren de Agua. We're going to keep doing this to every TDA member, MS-13 members removed from the country.
And at the northern border tonight, agents are concentrating on the illegal flow of fentanyl. The president has tied fentanyl to his tariffs against Canada and China, seeking to curb the drug's presence here in the U.S. And it is once again where we find our Allie Bradley, this time live along the northern border in Whitefish, Montana tonight. Allie?
Yeah, hey, Blake. So we've actually seen a dramatic drop under Trump 2.0 when it comes to fentanyl seizures here at the northern border. But the concern is now what could be getting through, and Canada might just be the key.
The resources are limited in this area in terms of manpower, infrastructure, so that partnership is key.
Spokane Sector Acting Chief Jason Leby saying their working relationship with Canada is paramount in securing the border, considering there are no barriers up here. The chief says they're working with law enforcement in Canada to get vehicle barriers along the northern border, hoping to jointly fund the effort.
That was a priority for us to identify locations along our 308 miles of border where vehicle barriers would be a good option for us to stop that cross-border activity, illegal activity.
This as fentanyl seizures are down big. During the first full 2 months of the Trump administration, the amount of fentanyl seized at the northern border is down 85% from the previous 4 coming in. And as tariff pressure is mounting, there is concern that smuggling drugs and goods could increase. But the mission doesn't change for the patrol. They will continue to stop anyone trying to enter illegally.
It's always a concern. The cartels are always going to find one way or another to move their product and make their money, so it's always a concern up here. We've spent a lot of time kind of sorting through that to see what's coming up and what's going out.
And while crossings and gotaways are extremely low up here, it's all hands on deck. From Border Patrol scouring the vast northern border with Canada to the port officers with the Office of Field Operations. They're working to make sure fentanyl and other illegal goods aren't being funneled through the areas where barriers are lacking.
I mean, they're going to take advantage of the path of least resistance. So if we give them a path of least resistance, they'll use it.
There are currently 249 agents across 308 land border miles up here. Compare that to the nearly 2,000 agents sprawled across the Del Rio sector's 245 miles at the southern border.
You know, our goal as the Border Patrol when it comes to, northern border, southern border, and coastal border is 100% situational awareness and operational control of the border, and that means zero gotaways.
Okay, so they do need more staffing in order to get down to that full operational control, Blake, and they might be getting some more staffing and resources. That might look like more buoy barriers in some of the lakes here that actually border Canada. So we'll keep an eye on that as well, Blake.
No, you will. Allie Bradley live tonight along the northern border for us. Allie, thank you. So over at the White House today, education in the spotlight just within the past hour or so here. The president signing a number of executive orders aimed at higher education. 2 of them, for example, include requiring schools to disclose foreign gifts, and mandating university accreditation to be merit-based. And one of the most prestigious universities in this entire country right now, also in the headlines. New anti-Israel protests at Yale University, the latest in a series at Ivy League schools. Last night, that was the scene right there. A crowd of about 200 gathered on the campus in New Haven, Connecticut. The protesters put up tents in protest of a Jewish organization's upcoming talk near the university with Israel's security minister. The school ordered them to disband by 11 o'clock at night, threatening action, which prompted the group to abandon ship and vowing not to stay out all night. Yale putting out a statement today saying that the gathering, quote, was not authorized by the university and is not known to be affiliated with any recognized student organization. They say the group's activities violated Yale's time, place, and manner policies. Now, the protest there, of course, comes on the heels of the Trump administration revoking over $2 billion in taxpayer funding for Harvard after that school refused demands by the administration to tackle what the administration says is things like anti-Semitism, DEI, and more. Harvard has since filed suit against the Trump administration. Now, before that, the administration also revoked $500 million from Columbia over anti-Semitism concerns as well. All this bringing Yale into the focus. The Education Department recently opened up a second investigation into anti-Semitism at the university, which is often a pipeline to power in D.C. For example, several presidents graduated from Yale. So too did the current vice president, J.D. Vance. Here now, the Republican California Congressman Kevin Kiley, who, by the way, holds a Yale law degree, also sits on the Education and Workforce Committee. First time on the show, I believe. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So there was this pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel organization at your alma mater last night. Yale basically said, get out of there. It ended at 11 o'clock last night. Obviously, a much different scene than what we saw in 2024. Do you think Yale handled this right? Do you give them kudos?
Well, let's start with the positives. So, starting with the very negative is that the scenes that we saw are absolutely horrifying. But starting with the positives, as far as the university's response, they did go out and they broke the encampment up pretty quickly. They're subjecting those who are present to disciplinary action. They've now revoked the official university sponsorship of the Yalees for Palestine group, which is this anti-Semitic pro-terrorist organization. So all of that, as you say, stands in stark contrast to the scenes that we saw play out last year, where you had these prolonged encampments that would last for weeks or for months with ongoing incidents of violence and discrimination and violations of civil liberties. So that's all good. The university came out with a pretty strong statement today, which I think is good as well. But I will say, when you have video evidence of Jewish students being blocked by these pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic protesters from simply moving about their own campus, we need to have a stronger response than what the university said.
So what do you think?
Anything more abhorrent.
Yeah. So what do you think Yale should do? You sit on the education committee that's looked into these anti-Semitic events on college campuses. What might your committee do?
Well, any student who is blocking another student from moving about campus, blocking their freedom of movement based upon their identity, based upon who they are, which is what has clearly happened in that video, they need to be immediately expelled. The university should make that very clear. They should also be prosecuted. I don't know who the district attorney in New Haven is right now, but it's hard to imagine more abhorrent behavior than that. But more fundamentally, and Yale has had a lot of very, very troubling incidents like this. I think that the new administration has been better than a lot of other administrations across the country, at least in terms of transparency, but it points to a much more deeply rooted problem in higher education, where you have these institutions of higher learning have become the epicenter in this revival of one of the world's most abhorrent and retrograde ancient prejudices of anti-Semitism. We have to ask ourselves, how has that happened? And I think that question needs to guide us towards the fundamental reforms in American higher education that we're starting to see happen now.
We started this show, Congressman, with the President of the United States live in the Oval Office. And one of the reasons the President had that event was because he signed a handful of executive orders involving education and higher education. The Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, was standing right there. And it strikes me that I just witnessed the President of the United States with the Education Secretary saying, hey, Education Department, we need you to do all these very important things. while he also wants to disband and get rid of the education department. How do you view that balance? It seems to me like we need the education department for some fairly crucial things.
Well, when it comes to core functions such as protecting civil liberties on university campuses, it doesn't particularly matter which agency, or department that function is housed within. The function is going to continue. And as you're seeing, this administration is carrying out that function in the way that our civil rights laws contemplate, in stark contrast to the last administration that let this chaos play out on university campuses.
What would you say to folks who say? What would you say to folks who say, I just saw the education secretary sitting there in the Oval Office, right? We need the department.
Look at the action that they've taken already. The administration has opened investigations in campuses across the country, including Yale. They've taken action to make it very clear that if you receive federal funding, you cannot allow for anti-Semitism and violations of civil liberties to run rampant on our campuses. So look at the action that has been taken. We're finally getting a measure of accountability, and it is desperately needed. I think that it's absolutely unacceptable for universities to say that they should be allowed to have these massive civil rights violations occur just because they do important research. I think we need to send a message that if you're receiving any federal funding whatsoever, then you need to protect Jewish students. You need to uphold our civil rights laws.
Congressman Kevin Kiley, Harvard undergrad, Yale Law, as the Ivies are in focus tonight with us here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us. Talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You got it. All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill, why the Republican governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is now pleading for help from the Trump administration. Plus this.
It is imperative that this administration facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia, which Donald Trump himself admitted was a mistake.
That's an Arizona congresswoman who appeared on Balance last night. She's calling for the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But is this a political fight worth having for Democrats? Full panel, other side.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
That's a bunch of bull. It's fact. It's not bull.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
Oh, make a point, you bully.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Nation. So the headlines for the Republican Party haven't all been rosy in recent days. Questions once again about the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Concerns about a changing tariff policy and President Trump's trade war still taking its toll on the markets. To put it a different way, you could say there could be an opportunity for Democrats. But are they picking the right battles? Various figures, for example, within the party are pushing comparisons, once again, of the president to Adolf Hitler when it comes to his deportations and actions against Harvard. And that includes a man that was just a handful of hundreds of votes away from becoming the president of the United States, Al Gore, comparing what he sees as the Trump's distortion of facts to Adolf Hitler's.
I understand very well why it is wrong to compare Adolf Hitler's Third Reich to any other movement. It was uniquely evil, full stop. The Trump administration is insisting on trying to create their own preferred version of reality.
That from a former vice president. Another issue that Democrats seem to be hitching their political wagon to, the wrongful detention of Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. In addition, the Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, 4 House Democrats have now traveled to El Salvador to call attention to his detention. The senator taking a step further, even calling for an American boycott of that nation, saying, quote, Costa Rica is a beautiful place. You don't have to go to El Salvador. But are these the battles that they should be fighting? Full panel here with me now. Taryn Rosenkrantz is a Democratic strategist. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump White House. Aaron McGuire, Republican strategist. And Dan Cannon, former battleground states director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Appreciate it.
Hey, Blake.
So you might have like a moment here, right? Trump's fighting the economy. He's having trouble explaining where things are going with tariffs. I already see you nodding your head, right?
Yeah.
Americans say we need prices lowered. And I hear Al Gore talking about Hitler and members of your party going down to El Salvador. That the right focus?
Well, look, Trump is underwater in every single issue right now, except for immigration, where he's basically tied with Democrats. But even in that, he's slipping. And I think he's slipping partly because the way they've handled Abrego Garcia and the due process questions around that issue is abhorrent to Americans. Now, I don't think that that's going to be the issue that wins us the House back in 2026.
Right.
We're not going to run on that.
It's going to be prices and the economy, most likely.
It is, which is not going well for Trump. But at the same time, you want competence and you want conviction and you want morality in your government. He's not showing any of that. And I think Democrats also want their party to stand up for what is right. And if they're going after due process and fundamental rule of law, they've got to fight that.
You were nodding your head before I could even get the words out of my mouth.
Well, I do think that what you're seeing, the people that are fighting that, I mean, that's a Maryland senator. I think that in Maryland right now, it's not a risk for him to go out and fight that fight. He's not going to lose in Maryland. In Maryland right now, Donald Trump has probably got the lowest approval ratings you can imagine. Those people are screaming about the fact that they don't have their jobs, that DOJ has been a disaster here in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. I mean, people are out of work. They're upset. You're in the grocery store. Everybody's tense. There's just a feeling here in this area where people are out of work and they're upset. So I'm not worried about Chris Van Hollen taking a risk on this issue. Let him be the moral compass and let him be the one to go out there on that. I think other people across the country are talking about these other issues, and that's where they should be. And those are going to be the ones fighting those fights in the battleground states that we want them to see.
I'm guessing you say rack up all the hotel points and frequent flyer miles you can get.
I hope another delegation heads down to El Salvador this week. I think it's great. I think actually what's happening is the Democratic Party doesn't have its identity organized. And you've got two camps that are polar opposites right now. You have AOC and Bernie Sanders on this oligarchy tour, and you have Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer saying, when are we going to learn the lessons of last November? Well, between these two polar sides within the Democratic Party is this question of what do they stand for? Do they stand for the MS-13 gang member in El Salvador? Well, that's what the leaders of the Democratic Party right now are telling us. And the fourth resignation today, and I know we're going to talk about this too, is a big deal. Alleged MS-13. Yep. But on two different accounts, he's been processed and adjudicated to be deported.
Listen, I hope Democrats keep it up, because they don't have an identity, they don't have a leader, and they don't have a policy position. Who are the loudest voices right now in the Democratic Party that are talking to the American people? Chris Van Hollen, who's going to El Salvador. I actually think every Democrat should take the NRSC up on their offer to fly them to El Salvador. The more the merrier down there for Democrats. You have Chris Van Hollen, you have AOC and Bernie Sanders on the Fight the Oligarchy tour. Wonderful branding. I could have made that for the Democrats because it's so bad for them. They are out of touch. And Jasmine Crockett's on late night TV going on and on about how Democrats shouldn't have to fight about the policy because they don't have one.
So I'm fascinated, Dan, with Bernie Sanders and AOC. There was a new poll out today, Harvard-Harris poll, which basically said, how do you want Democrats to fight? And they specifically asked about Bernie and AOC. Support liberal Democrats' aggression towards Trump. 72% of Democrats were basically behind AOC and Bernie. And I asked you in the commercial break, I said, do you think she's the future of the party in a couple of years? And you went, you not because you were disappointed, but because you had to think about it. And I said to you, the fact that you even have to think about it shows it's kind of like a real question.
I mean, I think we're at an inflection point. I mean, Aaron's not wrong about this point. There is not a consolidated party leadership. Ken Martin obviously is doing a great job with the DNC.
Is he? Look at David Hogg. I wouldn't say that's doing a great job.
He's doing a great job with the DNC. They're on offense. The people's town halls have been really effective. They're putting Republicans in Congress on their heels. But there's never a leader when you don't control Congress, the Senate or the House or the presidency. There's a bit of a vacuum, and folks have to figure it out. But here's the thing I want to point out about the caucus. And I know we're going to talk about Durbin in a minute, but there's going to be 18 senators in the Democratic caucus after 2026 who were there after Barack Obama's term. It is a new Democratic Party, one way or the other. And the reason I pause on AOC is that I think where we go is an open question.
So Democrats not seeking re-election. Dick Durbin announcing today. You also have Tina Smith, Minnesota, Gary Peters, Michigan, Jean Shaheen, New Hampshire. What about, to Dan's point, you do have, for all the questions about where Democrats go next, you're seeing some turnover here.
You're seeing turnover, but you're seeing turnover for somebody like Gary Peters, who really hasn't even been a senator that long and ran the NRSC, 2 cycles ago? And now he doesn't even want to be part of this apparatus anymore. Democrats aren't walking away because all of a sudden they feel that they are altruistic and this is a virtue that we are shepherding in the new generation. Joe Biden had to be dragged out of the White House by Nancy Pelosi. This is not a new era of the Democrat Party. They're just too scared to have David Hogg try to spend $20 million against them.
them.
But can't you say that they are moving to a new generation, whether you agree with it or not, or whatever happens?
That's the better way to think of it. It's the purifying of the Democratic Party to be more liberal and more extreme. The resignations that we're pointing out are in blue states. These are not in battleground states. Minnesota is a blue state kicking the guy out. Illinois is a blue state kicking the guy out. These are efforts to purify the Democratic Party and I think bring it more to AOC. And Nate Silver, love him or hate him, is out there saying AOC is the next pick for the Dems.
I'll give you the last word.
I absolutely think that there is no litmus test. And I think what you're going to find out is that you have an 80-year-old man retiring and that we may have learned from the last 80-year-old plus man not retiring.
Right.
I think that's a lesson learned.
That's a great lesson
And
learned.
I think that when the Republicans in 2010 weren't paying attention to those town halls, when people, like when the Democrats didn't pay attention when the Republicans had won those town halls and were winning the day then, we didn't pay enough attention. And I love that you guys are feeling so confident because I think when you've got veterans who are not really going to be able to receive the care because of the cuts that DOJ has made, you're going to see...
Let's not fearmonger. We're not going to fearmonger. We're not going to fearmonger.
Don't know on that front, but
my
to your point on the town halls.
is that you ignore those town halls where veterans are upset, and you're going to see that this isn't a purifying, this is a coming of a new party.
Gotta leave it there. Lots of questions. I guess 26 is not that far off.
500 and something.
There you go. And something. I knew someone.
Depends on how you look at it.
Appreciate it. Coming up here on the Hill, a plea for help denied. The governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, asking the Trump administration for some help. So why did the Trump administration say no to the former press secretary? And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Report, she'll speak with the father of the last known American hostage still alive in Gaza. That's 7 minutes away here on the Hill. My take, other side. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is now pleading with the Trump administration, and it could provide a window into the possible future of political battles over disaster relief. President Trump's former press secretary turned governor recently wrote a letter to the president asking him to reconsider his administration's denial of a request for a FEMA major disaster declaration and then federal funding after that. In March, 14 tornadoes ripped through Arkansas, killing 3, injuring dozens, causing massive damage. Even the Republican senators from that state are asking the administration to reconsider the denial. Now, how to handle federal funding assistance was one of the earliest debates of the president's second term as he took over relief efforts in North Carolina and California. The concept of reform involves giving money to the states and letting them handle recovery. But that hasn't happened yet. And in the case of Arkansas, they are still asking the government for help. So it is a conversation, a debate, and now a plea playing out just weeks before the Southeast United States stares down the start of yet another hurricane season. And that's my take tonight. A lot of news in this town tonight.